What's up guys, welcome to Munchkins Gaming, where we take your gaming to the next level. This is Munchkins logging in to bring you another Dissidia Final Fantasy Opera Omnia video, and welcome back to another video guide. In today's video, we are going to take a look at the Transcendence 6 fight, and of course we are going to take a look at the left and right Crucible, as well as the Reckoning stage in this video. So before we do start, like and subscribe if you haven't already. It does help the channel guys, and I really do appreciate it. So without further ado, let's start this video. So let's start this video off on the left Crucible and how to deal with the Lufenia orb and how the fight works. Now, there are two different bosses in this stage, the Kraken and the Turtle, and they both have their own Lufenia orbs. However, the ability to increase the Lufenia orb is the same for both of them. They just triggers at different times. So for the Kraken, it starts at the start of the battle and disappears once you reaches less than 30%. The Turtle will start at less than 80% and will not disappear. You will need a black crystal character in your party in order to get the perfect for this one. As for the way to increase the Lufenia orb, you get 8 orbs when the enemy is broken via a debuff. Unfortunately, the only one that I know that can do this is going to be Caius. You get +5 though when the enemies take damage from poison or sap effects. Now, as for how this fight works, honestly, we've fought these two different bosses so many times now, and there's really nothing new with them. Now, the Kraken can still delay and will get a huge brave gain once their HP reaches less than 50%. The Turtle can be pretty quick. It is one of those aggressive turtles, so be careful of its brave gain, brave plus HP attack. And yeah, when it's on its shell, it does limit the amount of brave damage that you can do to it. However, there are ways to go around that, like ignoring defense, like maybe even Shadow, or even use Auron. You know, both of those have ignore damage effects, especially Auron, you know, with his counter is really nice to have. Alright guys, now let's move on how you're gonna deal with this fight. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we have fought these bosses so many times that there's really nothing else really that I can tell you that will be considered as like a good, really good tip. So I guess from my point of view, off-turn damage is something that you may want to consider in this fight. The Turtle does get pretty quick and it can have too many turns for my liking. So if you have traps, counter damage with, of course, Auron and stuff like that, then definitely consider bringing them along. Of course, this is gonna be a fight where the boss will have to have a turn in order for the Lufenia orb to take. Unfortunately, do not delay because it might just end up being your demise. Now, the last thing is pretty simple. Tank or heals if you don't really want to deal with those HP damage, especially with the Turtle being quite aggressive sometimes with those. And the Lunatic Kraken does get some sort of, well, it does get like a huge brave gain, right? So I guess if you have like instant break in your calls, maybe a Bart's or something like that, you may want to consider that as well. And of course, if you have a tank, you can just, like, you know, tank the damage if you, by whatever reason, is unfortunate enough not to shave those off, or you can heal through them. If you have Porum, you know, you have a higher amount of HP, maybe you might survive, because she can also reduce the incoming HP damage. Anyway guys, let's move on to the right Crucible. So the right Crucible with the Lufenia orb, it starts at the start of the battle and you get +15 when the player launches 3 consecutive turns. Now you will need a yellow crystal character in order to perfect this fight. And as for how the fight works, we have fought this guy quite a few times as well. So the idea here is the boss does get multiple turns as his HP drops. It gets like a increase in speed, I suppose, and it does have a high turn rate attack as well as applying some debuffs such as a speed down debuff. It does get an increased stats as well when you hit less than 80% of its HP. Not that it's part of the Lufenia, you know, stat boost. I believe it gets some sort of stat boost for like 1 turn or something along those lines. Honestly, in this fight, I just don't let it have a turn, so it's kind of hard for me to get really into the mechanics of things. But speaking of how I dealt with this fight, like I mentioned, I just kind of turn manipulation my way into killing it. You will have to use 3 launchers here, or just use selfie, I guess. If you use selfie, then you know you can launch even without I suppose like a primary launcher. I don't know what I'm talking about, but you know, just yeah, if you don't have selfie, just make sure all your 3 party members can launch or can follow it up. As for the damage or the multiple turns it can have, I suppose you can bring a tank if you're really worried about it. You know, a cover tank is probably something that is a better choice rather than just, you know, a tank that soaks up AoE damage, because it can target single target damage. So be careful with that. And of course, you might as well use Pandemonium as your summon, because you're gonna be launching non-stop here. The additional damage is welcome. Alright guys, now let's move on to the Reckoning fight. Now the first wave is going to be the 2 Bishop Efficient, I can't remember their names, but essentially we have fought this boss many times as well, and they are probably some of the worst memories I have for a boss. And I guess some veterans might feel the same way whenever they see this fight. Or what's the other one? The Gremlin was the other one, I think. Those can have like lasting effects on you as a veteran player. But anyway, the orb does come out when their HP is less than 80% and will not disappear afterwards. You get +8 Lufenia orb counter when the enemy is inflicted by 8+ debuffs in 1 turn. Yeah. that's how it is. Anyway, as for how the fight works, it does levitate and gains a lot of brave, and will have some brave damage reduction alongside with that, and will be immune to delay as well. Now they usually follow this up when they're levitating. Their next move is usually going to be an AoE brave plus HP attack, and they also have a high turn rate abilities if you get broken, so watch out for that as well. Alright guys, now let's move on to the second wave of the Reckoning fight, which actually has no Lufenia orbs. However, there is a debuff mechanic that you will have to deal with. Now, the boss for this one will have, I'll just call it an aura, right? It has an aura, a buff aura that is pretty much OP, and you cannot kill it without inflicting debuffs. So the way it works is the more you apply debuffs, or the more debuffs that they have, the less aura buffs that they will have. So if you have 0 to 1 debuffs, for example, they will have this brave and HP damage resist all the way up to 200%, and they will also have an HP brave damage up by 50%, and they will instant turn every time you take a turn. Also, they have an attack speed and defense up by 50%. Now, once you hit like 2 to 4 debuffs, it will remove one of the aura buffs, I should say. So the brave HP damage resist will be removed. Once you hit 5 debuffs, it will also remove the HP brave damage up. So it basically removes now 2 of the aura buffs. Once you hit 6 and 7, it removes the instant turns. And once you hit 8, they will have no aura buffs left. Now, they can buff themselves and heal themselves as well as a HP regen buff, which is really annoying. They also will cleanse all their debuffs when they hit less than 90 and 60%. Alright, so how are you going to deal with this two-wave fight? Let's talk about wave 1 first. Honestly, guys, I do not know any character that can apply like 8 debuffs in one turn other than Yuffie. I'm pretty sure Yuffie is the only one that can do this. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to be corrected for this one, because honestly, when I did this in the JP, and as you guys can see, I actually using JP, I redid the fight, so unfortunately it won't reflect how hard it was prior to this, because my Auron is obviously level 90 now, and yeah. But in any case, Yuffie is probably the only one that I know that can apply like 8 debuffs in one shot. So yeah, I'm not really sure who else can, you know, deal with the Lufenia orb mechanic in this one. But if you're not planning to bring Yuffie, there are some ways to go around the Lufenia orb, and that is to do a lot of damage. So I would say, like, using even your burst phase or even your summon phase, at least one of them in this particular wave, will probably be enough for you to beat this wave. Essentially, you will have to do like 12 million damage, 6 million for each boss. Launch is a very good way to deal with a lot of damage, so if you still have Sid Reigns in your roster available, I suggest bringing him along, or even just using him as a call can help you out here as well. Unfortunately, like I said, I like to be wrong. If there is someone else, the only other one that I can think of is Faris, but I think Faris has like 6 debuffs that she can apply. It's not a total of 8. And Kefka is the same, I believe. I think Kefka is like 6 as well. But the thing with Kefka is one of his abilities has 2 debuffs and the other has 4. And then you have his EX, which means he's not applying all the debuffs in one turn. So yeah. Maybe applying some spears, but I'm not a spear person. I don't really apply a lot of spheres on my my character, so yeah, that's I can't really think of anyone else. So let me know down in the comments below if you can think of anyone else that can do this. But as far as I know, Yuffie is the only one that can do it. Now, as for wave 2, this fight is definitely made for Yuffie, because her EX debuff also will not allow the boss to have any buffs. So yeah, we can forget about the HP regen. I mean, they can still cleanse it, but essentially, you know, it's one of the most annoying part of this fight is the HP regen. They heal a lot. So the premise is obviously just maintaining a good amount of debuff. It can be pretty rough, especially with the first wave, you know, if you're trying to apply some debuffs here and there, but I would probably hold back a lot of your good, really good, and a lot, you know, and the multiple debuffs on this particular wave. Now, if you did manage to save up your bursts and your summon phase, or at least one of them, use them here, because you're definitely going to need it. Again, Auron and Gladio are probably like the best tanks to bring here, since they can apply a debuff straight away. Now Auron, I feel like, is obviously a step ahead, because he will ignore the defense, and so you will still do a relatively good damage. But yeah, like cover tanks are probably the best ones to bring once again, because a lot of their attacks are only single target, plus the off-turn damage is really nice, especially if they're regenning HP, right? Because they can do that with their abilities. So if you can just shave those, whatever they are healing, then essentially you're you know, you're just canceling out the HP regen, which definitely helps in this particular fight. Alright guys, now let's talk about characters that you might want to bring. Now for the left Crucible, I've put here a lot of the characters that are like purple or black crystal. So Caius, Auron, Leon, Gladio, Zac, and Kefka, Yuffie. These characters definitely going to help, especially Yuffie. You know, if you bring Yuffie along, you may want to use her for the Reckoning as well. But yeah, for the right Crucible, I got Reigns, Sid Reigns, you got Tifa, Zidane, Lael, Selphie, and of course Keys can be there as well. If you are planning to use Keys, I believe having a Reigns call on him is definitely something you might want to consider, so he can launch himself. I know he launches, makes it easier to launch, but sometimes he just doesn't get that because he gives someone else the chance to launch, right? So for the Reckoning stage, I've got Caius, Auron, Selphie, Yuffie, and Sid Reigns once again. It's the Reckoning is really going to depend what you bring in the left and right Crucible, of course, but some of these characters I just want to really highlight. Now, as for call characters to bring, the left Crucible is a little bit more forgivable. What's the word I'm looking for? Forgiving. It's a little bit more forgiving, so you can really bring any whole characters. I would just suggest bringing characters that can increase your overall HP damage, like for example, like a Bronth or Kurosame or something like that. You know, those just the usual, just the huge. As for the right Crucible, though, you may want to bring like Lael, Case, Sid Reigns if your particular team does not launch a lot, but you will need 3 consecutive launches. So it's something this is a little bit more limiting when it comes to your main party, what you went with. I guess if you went with like a full launching team, then you can probably put like the huge. We'll just call them the huge. And as for the Reckoning, the calls here are going to be very, very important. You know, Kefka, Titus, Exdeath, Caius, Amethyst Lion, and Faris are some of the characters that give you a bunch of debuffs in one call. And in my JP account, I still don't have Amethyst Alliance LD, so I don't really have her there, but I managed with Faris and I guess Kefka and Exdeath, you know, and bringing Caius along definitely helps because it's like 4 debuffs straight away, right? So yeah, a little bit more restrictive. So for the most part, you know, it is the fight that you will need to bring some of these multiple debuff calls, unless of course you already have Yuffie and you can just bring the huge. But I guess with Yuffie you won't have any debuff slot left. So I guess the huge can be something else. Alright guys, so we're finally at the end of this video, and of course I'll give you guys my final thoughts regarding this fight. To be honest, just remembering doing this fight in JP, it was a little bit of a struggle for me since I didn't have Amethyst Lion, and that really limited the amount of calls that I can, you know, use. Since Amethyst Lion is she's just really good. Like multiple debuffs, you know, and deletes turns. Her call was made for this fight. I did have Yuffie, but her calls aren't exactly the best because I believe it doesn't actually apply any of the debuffs. So I did consider bringing Yuffie along, but I just went with Caius, and I went with a Faris call. And I believe I went with Titus. I don't remember my call teams for this particular fight, but obviously when we're doing this fight, I still considered some really good ones, like X-Death is a good one as well with the HP poison, right? Although he doesn't apply a lot of debuffs, it's still a pretty useful one. And yeah, that's just par for the course when it comes to playing in JP for me. I'm a little bit more limited because I am basically a free-to-play player in JP. I haven't spent a single cent in my JP account, and I'm still managing pretty well. So anyway, overall the fight can be pretty difficult. The first wave can be very annoying, but I just want to suggest, my suggestion is just using your summon phase or your burst phase. The biggest trick in this is actually that part. If you don't have Yuffie, yeah, like I said, I don't know anyone else who can inflict like 8 debuffs in one go. So yeah, if you don't have it, then you will just have to really do a lot of damage as quick as possible. I remember, I think I was using my burst on this one with Caius. I used Caius's burst on the first wave, and the effect lasted to the second wave. So and then, you know, I used my summon phase there. So yeah, I would say mediocre to the difficulty. It is pretty restrictive. A lot of these Transcendence fights are pretty restrictive anyway. So I suppose we can go to slightly hard. Let's go with slightly hard. Anyway guys, that is it for this video. Please do remember to click like and subscribe if you haven't already. It does help this channel and I really do appreciate it. If you can share this video to other Dffoo players who are struggling to beat their Transcendence fight and Lufenia Plus fights. And hopefully this video can help them, and you can check out my other videos as well if you are struggling on those Lufenia fights. And leave down in the comments below, like I said, if I missed something, or if you have a different strategy, let me know down in the comments below, because at the end of the day, we are here to help the community who are struggling with Lufenia fights, and that is the aim for this, these videos that I make. And yeah, follow me on Twitter and on Facebook at Munchkins Gaming. This is Munchkins logging off. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next level.